In episode 4, both Aang and Iroh are locked up, but they can talk to each other. Aang's a little annoyed, but he knows that Iroh might have an idea of what's going to happen to him. Yeah, and Iroh has an idea. It's nothing good. He tells Aang, in my experience, the Earthbenders aren't exactly kind to fallen foes. Soldiers then come and they tell Iroh that he's headed off to a work camp that no one ever comes back from, called the Pit. As for Aang, he's headed for an audience with the king. At this point, Iroh had really hoped that Zuko had escaped, but Zuko couldn't leave a man behind. He'd grown too close to Iroh to just abandon him in that moment. He knew he needed to get him back. So he snuck back into the city. He posed as a guard. He went to the prison and he found out from another guard that the old prisoner was taken to a camp. The bald one was taken to a meeting with the king. In this moment, Zuko finds himself at a crossroads. He could go and bust up that meeting with the king, get the Avatar, return him to his father, and take the throne. But he decides to not go that route. He decides to stick with the mission that brought him here, and he goes and follows the road to the work camp. And the soldiers are being really, really rough on Iroh, but they kind of had good reason to. Iroh is known by many as the Dragon of the West. He's famous for being a Fire Nation general who laid siege to a place called Ba Sing Se for 600 days. A lot of people from the Earth Nation were killed. So having him in their midst, they're going to use this as a little bit of payback to torture him. And Iroh doesn't blame them for doing what they're doing. I mean, he chalks it up to, hey, we were at war, but he's also a changed man. Yes, he used to be that ruthless commander until he lost his son, and it changed everything for him. He returned home to mourn, and that's really when he grew close to Zuko, because for Iroh, he had just lost his son, and for Zuko, he was never all that close with his father, so the two made a great match. When it came time for Zuko to get on that ship and go find the Avatar, Iroh was right there. Not to be a babysitter, but to be a friend. That's one of the reasons why Zuko can't leave his man behind. And before Iroh can reach the pit, Zuko intercepts the cart. He attacks all the soldiers. He frees his friend. But as they're going to leave, Iroh shows one guy mercy, and that's a mistake. The Earthbender uses his powers to shoot a dagger at Iroh. It hits him in the back. Now Iroh's injured. It's not mortal, though. The two hop in a canoe, and they paddle back to the ship. As for Aang, his meeting with the king is weird, but familiar. Turns out this king, King Bumi, is an old friend of Aang. They grew up together. Aang can't believe that Bumi's still alive after 100 years, and Bumi just equates it to, a good restrictive diet and exercise, but for Aang, it's really nice to see a familiar face, even if that face is old at this point. Bumi declares to the entire palace that they are to throw Aang a feast. As Aang is waiting to eat, down in the city, Sokka has some questions for Sai. Mainly, why were you working with the Fire Nation? And Sai's answer is, it's complicated, man. I did what I had to do to survive and to keep Teo safe. As Sokka is giving Sai that disappointed, disgusted look, Katara runs in and alerts everybody that she knows where Aang is. Aang's been arrested. Now they need to get in the palace to save his life. The first thing Sai does is just apologize, saying, look, we're not getting in. Sorry, he's lost for good. But Teo says, wait, you told me that you found these underground tunnels. You told me the founders of the city used them to meet without anyone knowing? Get them in those tunnels and they can get to the palace. Sai is hesitant to do that, though, because he tells them they're tunnels, but they're very unstable. No one that goes in those tunnels ever comes out alive. And even if I get you through the tunnels, there's nothing I can do about the palace guards. But Katara and Sokka say, don't worry about that. We'll take care of that. Just get us inside. Sai ends up folding under peer pressure and agreeing to take the two to the tunnels. As they're getting ready to leave, Sai gets a message from his firebender contact, and he's reluctant to answer it, but Sokka says, dude, answer that message. Tell them that you'll meet. Then go to the Earth Kingdom generals and let them know that they can set a trap to round up these spies. Sai shakes his head, however, and says no. The Firebenders made it clear, any resistance, and they'll send everything they have to attack us. But Teo says, let them come. We have the Avatar now. They go to pack up their stuff to leave for the tunnels, but when Katara goes to fill her jug of water, she's approached by Jet. And Jet can't believe that she intervened on the plan. He starts preaching to her how he has to make hard decisions and how he's actually the good guy, but she doesn't want to hear any of it. And when he puts her hands on her, she shows off her fighting ability, easily throwing him down and then just saying goodbye. By morning, Katara and Sokka have reached the entrance of the tunnels. They start making their way inside and they start hearing some music, which they didn't expect to hear. Turns out there is a full band playing because of the acoustics. Sokka makes mention how if this group is here, tunnels can't be so bad, but the leader of this music group says, oh, no, these aren't the tunnels. The tunnels are over there. And what he points at looks way scarier than what they're in. He tells them that they really shouldn't go in there, but Katara says we have to. We got to find our friend. So he says, okay, in that case, let me give you the backstory of the tunnels, because it's a tale of two lovers. Oma and Shu met on top of the mountain that divided the two villages. They fell in love, but their two villages were at war with each other. That meant that they really weren't supposed to see each other, but they found another way. They learned earthbending from the badger moles. They were the first earthbenders, and they used that earthbending ability to create the tunnels. They would meet in those tunnels in secret, and their love formed. One day, however, Oma didn't show up. She'd been killed in an attack. Shu was devastated, and he decided to wield that earthbending power. Instead of killing everybody, they declared the war was over. Both villages then helped build a new city where they could live in peace. And that new city is Omashu, as a monument to their love. He then points out the sign that reads above the entrance to the tunnels. It says, "Love is brightest in the dark." He wishes the group luck, and they head inside. But shortly after getting the tunnels, they realize just how difficult this is going to be because those tunnels are moving. I mean, literally, they're changing, shape-shifting. As for Aang, he's just enjoying a feast. But his friend that he knew, Bumi's changed. Bumi has some questions as to how Aang looks the same. And the story about him being frozen for 100 years is just fishy. So he starts to give Aang some tests. Little ones, like he knew that Aang was a vegetarian, so he offers him meat. He gives him another test when he encapsulates him in rock candy, but Aang is able to get out of him. The final test is going to be when Bumi says, "We will fight to the death." And Aang doesn't want that. He doesn't want to kill his friend. All he wants to do is get out of the palace so he can go to the northern tribes. But Bumi isn't willing to listen. King Bumi, he wants revenge. Because just like Sokka felt about Aang when he first met him, he's pissed off that Aang abandoned everybody when they needed him most. So he wants to teach the Airbender a tough lesson. That if you do want to save humanity, you're going to have to make tough choices, like killing a friend. But still, Aang is refusing to kill his friend, so Bumi puts him in a situation where he's going to have to choose. He throws two boulders up in the air, one covering Aang, one covering himself, and he's going to make Aang pick which person dies. And Aang is struggling to keep both of them in the air as he's begging Bumi to just move, but Bumi's not doing it. That's when Katara and Sokka show up. They were able to get into the kingdom because they met a badger mole and they realized what that statement above the tunnels meant. The badger mole would respond to love, like the love of a brother and a sister. So the badger mole burrowed its way to the tunnel and it allowed both Katara and Sokka to show up just in the nick of time and save everybody. But Bumi isn't happy. No, he's pissed off. He feels like Aang cheated. Like he was supposed to do this by himself. But Aang points out, no, I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm going to do it with my friends. And then he pulls out a little rock statue that Bumi gave him 100 years ago as a child. And he says to him, just like I'm calling on a friend right now. And he hands it over. Aang apologizes for not being there for Bumi for 100 years, but he assures him, I'm here now. And it completely changes Bumi's mindset. Right before he lets Aang, Katara, and Sokka leave, one of his soldiers comes up and starts talking about reinforcements. And Aang says, what's going on? Are you guys expecting people? And Bumi says, yeah, we're expecting the Fire Nation. They're coming, but we'll be ready for them. We found out they were coming thanks to a little help from the Mechanist who tipped us off. He then commands that all three of them get out of there because the Avatar has places to be, and at this point, Omashu can take care of itself. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.